2025-2026, which promises no tax hikes or no even new tax. But will this be a better year than last year? Because the government says that they will borrow 923 billion shillings. Well, I'm not the expert, but if I can just take you to our gardens, that's the KBC Garden Studios. As you can see right there, we will have the experts for you. They will be talking to Carol Njenga. We have an expert from ISPAC and also Ernest Enyang. We will be going through analyzing the budget for you, and we have so much more for you. But first, let's have the highlights.
Demos in the city. Protesters take to the streets of Nairobi demanding justice for blogger Albert Ojwang, who died in police custody. Investigations into the mysterious killing of a blogger gains momentum, with IPOA plans to summon a Deputy Inspector General of Police, Eliud Lagat. Broad-based budget. Government to borrow 923 billion shillings to plug a gaping hole in the 2025-2026 budget.
Welcome back. Our sign language interpreter is Bayon Abuli. And remember, we would love to hear from you. You can send us your comments and feedback on KBC Channel 1. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and also Twitter. You could also send me a message on Cynthia Nyamai on all the platforms. Now, the government plans to borrow 923 billion shillings from the local and international markets in a bid to plug a gaping hole in the country's expenditure plan. Treasury Cabinet Secretary John Mbadi has told Parliament that the government will borrow 635.5 billion shillings from the domestic market, while 287.7 billion shillings will be sourced from the external markets. Warimo Njenga has more updates on the numbers.
Thursday afternoon, the man of the moment, John Mbadi Ngongo, strolled inside the National Assembly chambers with the traditional budget briefcase in hand, ready to make his maiden speech. And when he stood up, he never disappointed. For 2 hours and 9 minutes, CS Mbadi, without a break, outlined the government's expenditure plan for the fiscal year 2025-2026, highlighting top priority areas.
As part of the process, the government is focused on broadening the tax base while reducing the burden of compliance. In this regard, we have prioritized sectors such as the digital economy, agribusiness, and small and medium enterprises in tax, education, and outreach programs.
The Treasury boss presented before the August House a 4.29 trillion shillings spending plan, which is 22.3% of the gross domestic product. Of this, recurrent expenditure will receive the lion's share at 3.13 trillion shillings, equivalent to 16.3% of GDP, while development expenditure has been capped at 693.2 billion shillings, or 3.6% of the GDP. Kenya Revenue Authority has been tasked to collect 3.3 trillion shillings, equivalent to 17.2% of GDP. Of this, ordinary revenue is projected at 2.8 trillion shillings, while ministerial appropriation in aid is projected at 567 billion shillings.
Our focus in the financial year 2025-26 and over the medium term will be to strengthen domestic resource mobilization through the following key initiatives. First, continue with the implementation of the national tax policy and the medium-term revenue strategy to provide a consistent and predictable framework for tax administration and policy formulation. Second, continue with the automation of tax administration processes to improve the overall efficiency of the tax system. And third, enhancing non-tax revenue collection by enabling ministries, departments, and agencies to generate income through the services they provide to the public.
Development expenditure and long-term investments have been reduced by 14.6 billion shillings from 707.8 billion shillings to 693.2 billion shillings, while recurrent expenditure has been allocated 3.13 trillion shillings. Counties are expected to receive 405.1 billion shillings as their equitable share. The government plans to borrow locally and internationally 923.2 billion shillings with the intention of reducing the deficit to 4.8% from the current 5.1%. On debt repayment, a total of 1.1 trillion shillings will be used to repay debts. Education takes the largest portion of the budget, which has increased by 1.6 billion shillings to 702.7 billion shillings from 701.1 billion shillings, accounting for 28.1% of the entire budget. To support Kenya's infrastructure sector and refurbishment of roads, the National Treasury has allocated 217.3 billion shillings, the second highest allocation, followed by National Security, which has received 202.3 billion shillings. The health sector has been given 138.1 billion shillings, out of which 6.2 billion shillings will go towards the universal health coverage. The agriculture sector has received 47.6 billion shillings, while the affordable housing program allocation has been pegged at 128.3 billion shillings. Allocation to Parliament has been increased to 48 billion shillings, while the Judiciary and the Judicial Service Commission will receive 27.8 billion shillings. Weri Mujenga for Prime Edition.
Well, Weri Mujenga has just given us an overview of the budget and who are the biggest gainers. Well, education has been allocated 702.7 billion shillings, making it the biggest beneficiary of this year's budget. And also the Teachers Service Commission is set to receive 387.2 billion shillings for recruitment of intern teachers and capacity building as teachers on competency and also based education. As Regina Manyara narrates, healthcare has also received billions of shillings allocated for the universal health coverage, primary healthcare and medical cover for orphans, elderly and severely disabled persons in society.
Education is set to receive 28% of the total 4.29 trillion shillings budget. This comes on the back of preparations by the Kenya National Examination Council to administer 4 distinct national exams for Grade 6, Grade 9, Special Kenya Certificate for Secondary Education in July, and the Kenya Certificate for Secondary Education in October.
I have proposed a total allocation of 702.7 billion to the education sector, which is almost 28% of our entire budget. This will include an allocation of 387.2 billion to the Teacher Service Commission. The allocation for TSC will include 7.2 billion for recruitment of intern teachers and 980 for capacity building of teachers on competence-based education curriculum. Further, I have proposed an allocation of 7 billion for free primary education, 28.9 billion for junior secondary school capitation, and 51.9 billion for free day secondary education.
7.2 billion shillings has been earmarked for the recruitment of intern teachers, 3 billion shillings for the school feeding program, and 4 billion shillings for technical, vocational education training and entrepreneurship projects. Healthcare is set to receive 138.1 billion shillings that will fund universal health coverage, primary health care, and medical cover for the orphans, elderly, and severely disabled persons in society.
13.1 billion for primary health care, and that is up from 7.1 billion in the current year. And 430 million to provide medical cover for the orphans, elderly, and disabled persons in our society.
Counties are set to get 405.1 billion shillings as equitable share of revenue raised nationally.
In order to ensure food and nutrition security, infrastructure development, improved water and sanitation systems, among others, county governments will receive an additional 69.8 billion as additional allocations. Equalization Fund. Mr. Speaker, to support implementation projects in the marginalized areas, 7.85 billion has been proposed as an allocation to the Equalization Fund in the financial year 2025-2026, and an additional 2.74 billion to settle outstanding arrears owed to the fund,
pushing the total amount that counties will get to 474.9 billion shillings. Regina Manyara reporting for Prime Edition.
Well, now let's go to the biggest budget losers, and you will have to pay more to purchase products made out of plastics as the National Treasury proposes a 25% excise duty or 200 shillings per kilogram of imported plastic products, which is higher. In a raft of tax administration reforms, non-resident digital service providers without a physical address in the country will also be required to pay tax on supply of accessible services.
The National Treasury says the 2025-2026 budget will be funded by the reforms in tax administration. Treasury Cabinet Secretary John Badi says the tax reforms are expected to raise about 30 billion shillings. In tax reforms, Kenyans will have to pay more to afford a number of commodities after they were moved from zero-rated to VAT exempt. Locally assembled mobile phones, electric bicycles and animal feed are some of the commodities proposed to be moved from zero rating by the Finance Bill 2025.
Zero-rated goods and services that are consumed locally to exempt status. Further, Mr. Speaker, some of the goods exempted from VAT have multiple uses, making it difficult to effectively monitor whether they are finally used for the intended purpose. In this respect, the bill proposes to amend the VAT Act to remove such exemptions.
In other tax measures, plastic products including plates will be more expensive as the National Treasury proposes to increase excess duty on imported plastic products by 25% or 200 shillings per kilo, whichever is higher.
To enhance clarity and consistency in the administration of excise duty legislation, the bill is proposing to amend the Excise Duty Act to clarify that imported plastic products, including plates, self-adhesive plastics, and printed polymers, will be subjected to excise duty at 25% of the excise value or 200 per kilogram, whichever is higher.
To widen the tax bracket, non-resident digital service providers will now be taxed for accessible services sold online in Kenya, even without a physical presence.
The bill proposes to amend the Excise Duty Act to bring non-resident persons without a physical presence in Kenya into the tax net when they supply accessible services through these mediums.
Those seeking to purchase helicopters and light aircrafts will have to pay more as import declaration fee and railway development levy are set to be introduced.
The bill proposes to amend the Miscellaneous Fees and Levies Act to introduce import declaration fee and railway development levy on small aircrafts and helicopters, but retain the exemption on spare parts of all aircrafts.
Imported leather products will continue to be expensive as the government stays the 35% excess duty to protect local tanneries. Benson Rioba reporting for Prime Edition.
The government has committed to ensure proper management of public resources, addressing the media shortly after presenting the 2025-2026 budget at Parliament buildings in Nairobi. National Treasury Cabinet Secretary John Mbadi said the ministry has come up with various policy changes meant to curb wastage of public resources, including the use of the end-to-end procurement system to enhance efficiency and transparency in public procurement.
Shortly after presenting the 2025-2026 budget at Parliament buildings, the Treasury Cabinet Secretary John Mbadi assured Kenyans that their money collected through taxes will be prudently spent. He said Treasury has come up with a raft of policy proposals which will radically change the management of public resources.
If you listen to me clearly, this speech was heavy on reforms. And this is not for nothing. People of Kenya have been saying we are collecting enough taxes, we are collecting enough revenue, but how it is applied is a question.
Mbadi added that the government has constituted a committee which has assessed and cleared for payment pending bills amounting to 229 billion shillings, with 80 billion shillings related to road sector currently being paid.
The rest also, once we conclude the exercise, we will take a proposal to the cabinet through CAB memo, which then would give us the go-ahead to come up with strategies of paying the other pending bills. But the accrual accounting will help first in clearly in capturing the data accurately to make those bills be part of the financial statements of government.
Tilio Marco for Prime Edition.
Well, mixed reactions from members of the political spectrum have greeted the 2025-2026 budget speech, which was presented on Thursday by Treasury Cabinet Secretary John Mbadi. Some have hailed the budget as progressive and balanced on account of allocating of more resources to the social sectors, while at the same time leaving tax levels largely intact. However, a section of political class have poked holes in the budget, saying it didn't factor in measures to address the country's debt crisis and the spiraling cost of living. Let's now have a look at the reactions by various political leaders who attended the budget speech in Parliament.
In the area of SHA has had a problem, it still has problems, because SHA consists of 3 funds. NHF was just 1 fund, contribution. And now with SHA, what we've been having before was just the shift, which is what is contributed. We haven't been putting much on the primary health care fund and the emergency care fund, which is to come from the tax.
We are looking at the manufacturing sector, industries, value addition, and the rest. And the Vision 2030, manufacturing sector ought to have contributed 15% of the GDP, close to this time. The latest results announced this year, it has shrunk to about 5%. We had expected the government, as the executive, will make concerted efforts to ensure there's enough allocation or budgetary allocation towards enablers of industry and manufacturing.
Wamejaribu na pia hakuna increase ama hakuna kuongezwa kwa VAT ya taxes. Tumesema Mkenya ameumia zaidi. Kwa hivyo sasa hakuna kuumiza wa Kenya. Tuangalie mambo mengine. Hii system ya procurement pia ni muhimu.
Has gone to health, which is reasonably very low. So we should consider in the near future to actually revise upward money for health, so that we have doctors back to hospitals and the patients to be well taken care of in our hospital.
What we want is a stable economy. It may not grow, although they said the economy will grow by 4.1%, but the indicators are good that we need a lot of stability.
We had a huge problem last year with construction of infrastructure projects and infrastructure creation for grade 9. We had a problem employing teachers. We had a huge problem of capitation. You know, capitation had gone to 87 shillings per child. Well, an improvement from the previous 82, 84 since 2020, but still has been not very good. So, education sector has really ripped big.
Looking at the budget of around 4.3 trillion for the first time in the Republic, it confirms that our budget is increasingly growing. It is growing because of the demand in terms of the needs. Looking at the servicing debt is becoming a challenge. 1.3 trillion is becoming a huge burden for Kenya. Personnel emolument is also growing. It is so demanding, because if you look at almost 2.something trillion, it's going to personnel emolument. Of course, if you combine both counties and national government, it's becoming another burden, and it's a fixed cost that has to be serviced. Looking at what is going to devolution again is another issue. If you consolidate all of them together, we have a very thin space for development.
Out of the 4.3 trillion shillings budget, at least 1.1 will be going to just servicing debt interest, not even principal, just the interest alone. So how as a country will we be able to grow? The development budget is only 600 billion shillings, and you can even see that is hardly enough to even deal with some of our stalled roads and some of our different stalled projects.
Well, mixed reactions there from Parliament and various political leaders. Remember, we will be analysing the budget for you. But first, let's go on our fast break and resume on the 2025-2026 budget.
Tracy, ulifikisha doza trip?
Sijafikisha bado. Saving for retirement has been my biggest priority.
So when trip, nilikuambia jua kali kuna do. Mimi venye nimejipanga na hii biashara yangu, sione nikiwahi sote.
Trip bado tunaenda. Na by the way, do you save for retirement?
Kwani mimi ni mzee? I'm still young and I've got plenty of time to start saving later. Then again, si watu wa jua kali, hatunanga hizo ma pension plans.
Kwani ujui unaweza register with an individual pension plan yenye iko regulated na RBA?
Inawakaje?
Una deposit any amount of money at any time na uko guaranteed ukikuwa mzee. Maisha yako itakuwa nywe.
By the way, nakushoni ni ukweli. Hadi mimi boost savings zangu kwa scheme yetu ya job.
Really?
Nilijua siwezi kuwa kijana forever. Sis, usikose kujipanga mapema. Tutakuwa wazee wa maana.
Hebu nionyesheni kuwa mzee wa maana.
Ensure you save and plan for your retirement during your youthful working days. Provided you are earning an income, you can join a retirement benefit scheme registered by Retirement Benefits Authority and safeguard your tomorrow. RBA, safeguarding your retirement benefits.
Welcome back. Remember, we are still talking about the 2025-2026 budget, and I told you I'm not the expert, but on the other side in our KBC Garden studio, we have Wairimo Njenga. Wairimo Njenga, it's been a long day for you. What are some of the highlights for you when it comes to this year's budget?
Well, thank you, Cynthia Nyamai. As you have rightly put it, we are here to break down the 2025-2026 budget. And as you have been watching, we have broken down for you. We have looked at the gainers, we have looked at the losers, we have looked at the budget overview. And the 2025-2026 budget presents an intricate balancing act. And that you will hear from our experts who are joining me right here at KBC Gardens. And on my immediate left, I am joined by Robert Miner, who is a member of Public Finance and Tax Committee at ISPEC. And on my on my left, I am also joined by Helena Chieng, who is a tax manager at EY, and they will be telling us the spending record of 4.29 trillion shillings to support core sectors while avoiding fresh tax hikes. The strategy is heavily reliant on existing taxes, and that is based on the speech that the Cabinet Secretary for National Treasury, John Badi, made, compliance gains and borrowing, particularly domestically. Now, with the ambitious fiscal targets and a renewed IMF engagement, its success hinges on efficient execution and public acceptance. And to break down to us, Robert Miner in studio with us here at KBC Gardens to just help us understand this budget that is kicking off from July for the next financial year, and also Helena Chieng from EY. Now, starting off, the government has unveiled a 4.2 trillion shillings spending plan, and 30% of this is going to debt repayment. Essential services like education have taken up about 28%. In your view, both of you, does this budget continue to the trend of spending beyond our means? Robert, let me start with you.
Thank you very much, Wairimu, for having us this evening. Now, at the foremost, I would like to say that the budget it's quite ambitious, no doubt about it. One of the interesting things that I heard the CS say is that they are aware that there are concerns in the general public that the government is actually potentially living beyond its means. So, one, I do appreciate that the government is actually listening to the people, and I do appreciate that there's concern among the general public that we are probably living beyond our means. Now, 4.2 trillion, and compared to last year where, it's a growth from last year. And the question is, since we have been saying that our debt levels are quite high, are we still going to continue the same trend where we are just having the increments on an annual basis without trying to rationalize and reduce some of the expenditure to make sure that we don't accumulate as much debt as we've been accumulating in the past? So it is a delicate balancing act, because once again, and I think last year something that we had the two committees in Parliament, because you have two very important committees. The one that looks at the allocations, the budgetary allocations, headed by Honorable Atadi, and we have the one that looks at the revenue side, Honorable Kuria. Now, we tend to focus so much on the one that is headed by Bona Kuria, that is on the revenue aspect, but we do not focus a lot on the expenditure. So at times, there's a lot of pressure from all quarters. MPs asking for more allocations, the judiciary, and among all the MDAs. So the balancing act, I know, is quite tough, but we are hoping that we can get to a point where we can get to balance our revenue vis-a-vis the expenses. Yeah.
Helen, indeed, our CS National Treasurer did indeed say that we have been having unrealistic budgets in the past, and he said he has two-pronged approaches that he's handling this budget with, and one is zero-based budget and reduced revenue projections in line with the trends, also consistent with the economic projection. From where you sit, do you think this is a realistic budget?
Well, for sure, as Robert has said, it's definitely not a realistic budget, especially because we are looking at a 922 billion Kenya shillings deficit. So definitely it shows us that we are living beyond our means, and if we continue like this at the long run, it's not sustainable for us as an economy, and therefore we definitely need to look at it from a closer lens to just ensure that going forward we try and reduce our fiscal expenditure, because now we are at a point as a country where we are not able to increase taxes. We've reached a tax saturation point where any potential tax increase is met with resistance from the public. So from that end, we cannot count on that angle of raising ordinary revenue, and at the same time we're struggling with debt, which we're trying to reduce. So naturally the other area to focus on would be our expenditure. Can we now look at the inline items in our budget that would ensure that we only budget or project for what is very necessary for us as a country and for our economy going forward, as opposed to having inflated budgets year in, year out, and always having a deficit. And just looking at historical statistics, last year we also had a deficit of 701 billion Kenya shillings. The previous year was also a deficit. So it shows that this is an ongoing trend that really needs to be looked at. And you've said something interesting about the two-pronged approach of number one, trying to reduce our debt in terms of now the fiscal measures that government is taking towards reducing the debt expenditure that we have as a country. This is just noting that about 1.3 trillion of our total budget is going towards servicing debt, which is really not realistic for us at this moment. So yes, it is unrealistic. We continue to budget with money that we do not have. You will talk about collections, I know, in this bulletin, but yeah, it's very unrealistic. Yeah.
Looking at the deficit, we're seeing a deficit of 923.2 billion shillings, and this will be borrowed domestically and also externally, but more will be borrowed locally.
Yeah.
So, do we have a borrowing addiction as a country? You can share with us.
Well, that's I don't know whether I would call it an addiction, but yes, we do borrow quite a lot from the domestic market. And one of the things that I find as a country, and at times I do empathize with the government as well, because as a country, the economy that we have in Kenya is largely service-based. we really don't have a lot of revenue that might come from natural resources. You might talk of other countries in Africa or beyond where they could say, they'll sell their oil, they'll sell their minerals or other sources to generate additional revenue. But in Kenya, it's a service-based economy. The other sectors contribute, not too much because service contributes more than 50% of our economy. Now, the two options that we have, because we moved from a low-income country to a low-middle-income country. And if you think about the grants that we are getting, I think from this budget we are getting less than 50 billion, if I'm not wrong, from the numbers I got. So we really don't get grants that we used to get many years ago. So our two sources is now debt and now getting the taxes. Now, as to borrowing, from where I see it and comparing with other economies, borrowing is not as bad as it is, because even individuals do actually borrow for good reasons. But the question that we have always had is that do we get value for the money that we borrow? Because every country in the world, I mean, even in the US, they're having trouble trying to balance their budget because they also getting to a point where, they're having a huge issue. So every country borrows, or most of the countries actually do borrow. The issue is we do have issues in accountability. People are doubting whether the money, when the money is borrowed, is actually being put into good use. So if we do borrow light amounts, we do invest in good projects that are going to yield benefit to the common mwananchi, and then we have additional taxes coming in for those development projects, then it may not be too bad. So we must also look at it from the spending perspective, whether we get value for that money. Yeah.
Our public debt is estimated to be at 11 trillion shillings and is projected to hit about 14 trillion shillings by 2029. Is it time for the government to stop ducking the hard fiscal decisions?
For sure. My opinion is that we really need to make very hard financial and fiscal decisions as a country to trim down that debt. Of course, we need to borrow. That is the norm in the global economy. A lot of countries borrow. But I think for Kenya, ours is more. We are borrowing more than we actually need, in my opinion, and we're borrowing more than we can actually sustain. Like, for instance, from last year March to this year March, our borrowing has increased by about 800 billion Kenya shillings. And when you look at the corresponding developments, expenditure that this money has, we can't really see. And a lot of people are now concerned that even if we are borrowing, we are not seeing the value for our money, right? So 11 trillion for me is quite high. And that's why I think I'm very happy when I hear the government saying that we are trying to reduce our debt expenditure, at least to bring it to about 5.5% of our GDP and even lower, which is now more sustainable for us as a country. Because remember, if we spend a lot of money, let's say, for example, a huge percentage of our GDP trying to service debt, and this is not even the principal, it's even interest on that debt, it means that critical areas in our economy, critical sectors are then being set aside, or critical developmental activities are being put aside for us to now finance this debt. Like this 1.3 trillion Kenya shillings could have been put in better use in our economy to help the common mwananchi as opposed to servicing debt. So if we can borrow, right, borrowing is not bad, but if we can find ways to reduce that debt, and I know we are trying to do it, like now treasury bills and bonds are under 10% in terms of interest rate, then it would be more sustainable for us as a country. And even that projected 14 trillion shillings, we might not really hit it, rather we might turn things around for us as a country. And also that, just coupled with those expenditure rationalization measures that are being promised by government, we should be able to at least settle that here.
Sectors, Robert. Infrastructure has been given 217.3 billion. National security has been allocated 202.3 billion. Health is getting 138.1. Agriculture 47.6 billion shillings. From where you sit, do you think these allocations reflect urgent and socio-economic priorities?
Yeah, I'll say yes, because we have some key sectors in this economy. I mean, and in any economy, health sector, for instance, the healthcare. Every Kenyan or every citizen deserves, affordable and decent healthcare. we've had a lot of outcry in terms of access to healthcare. Since we moved from NHF to SHIF, one of the key statistics that I've seen the CS pushing is that we have 22 million Kenyans registered under the new system, compared to, they were saying 8 million under the previous system. That's a good number, and it's a good increment in terms of the people who are registered under the new system. So with that, if they do actually then manage to correct the contributions, because they are very high now, 2.75% is a high number. Okay. With that high number of people who have registered, that I would then expect that they are getting much more in terms of the contributions towards the healthcare. Because healthcare is being financed, for instance, from those contributions as well as the exchequer, what they are allocating there.
Okay.
So the services that we are getting there should be commensurate. Education, again, it's the key and the center of any economy. It helps to empower people. The most vulnerable in the society, you give them a chance to get out of poverty by giving them a chance to, to get education. So they are key sectors and they are good allocations. Obviously, they might say that they deserved more.
Okay.
But again, I guess we have a cake, and the cake has to be divided among very many people who are looking to get a piece.
All right, Robert. We'll come back to you, Helen, as you tell us the revenue collection targets and whether we are broadening the tax base, as the government has been pushing to do that. And that will, I'll answer that after we come back after this commercial break.
Well, thank you so much for that. I liked what Robert said. It's a tough one for government. It's a large cake, but has to be divided into many pieces. We will be going back to the analysis. And as the National Treasury unveiled Kenya's latest budget, totaling 4.29 trillion shillings, we spoke to Kenyans from different walks of life to find out what their perspective is of the numbers, as well as what are their priority areas. And this is what you had to say.
So in my opinion, mi naweza sema like serikali inafaa pia kwa hiyo budget yao wana favor like students, upate like the equipments zenye ma students wanatumia. Unapata like ziko kinda cheaper kwa sababu pia wengine we are self-sponsored, like ni sisi tunajisomesha, so we have to work hard to get the money.
The taxes that have been introduced were high. Even some of our parents are experiencing tough times because even for the like housing levy, they introduced the housing levy, but we have not seen the outcomes for that.
At least watry kupunguza hizo taxes personally, because si kila mtu ako sawa.
They should focus more on healthcare. We need serious allocations on healthcare, and the allocations on youth empowerment and women, because we have the issue of unemployment in Kenya. It is a thorny issue.
Well, this year's budget has been met with mixed reactions by the keyboard warriors, who without a doubt had a lot to type. The budget reading seems to have come at a time when the keyboard warriors were already interacting with more content regarding the demise of Albert Ojwang. Nevertheless, budget reading would go on, and netizens had comments to post as Triza Mutai now narrates.
A day meant for budget reading, but seems other plans were in play that left netizens glued to their screens. With a trending hashtag online dubbed Justice for Albert Ojwang, netizens proceeded to share content typing, "No justice, no budget." But the budget was read as planned. The cyber surfers had different opinions concerning the budget. Others seemed to marvel at the National Treasury Cabinet Secretary John Mbadi and the budget, with a netizen by the name Kipleleib writing, "Mbadi and the team knows what they are doing. Cheers." What caught the attention of some netizens is that, according to Mbadi, in order to empower the youth and support businesses owned by youth and women, he has proposed allocation of 105.6 billion shillings for these initiatives. Well, the online warriors were just ready to pounce, and pounce they did. Omondi responded, government has no business providing monetary incentives to businesses. Just make the environment friendly and leave the rest to investors. Peter's thoughts, budgets aren't just financial documents, but moral ones that are expected to deliver economic justice to country's needs. Kipchirchir seeming uninterested? Heri ningoje news nipewe summary. On Boa's opinion, Kenyans are no longer interested in budgets. You can as well increase budget for bloggers. We don't care. Mr. Know-how lamenting, NIS is given a lot of money than agriculture. We are cooked. Appeals only takeaway during the reading of the budget is that the parliament is empty. Wow, what a keen comment. For Prime Edition, I am Teresa Mutai.
As you can see, your voice matters to us. Now, this year's national budget was anything but ordinary, from the absence of the ceremonial Volkswagen Passat to the eerie silence where cheering crowds once stood and the sight of helicopters overhead as protests brewed just meters away. Trevor Ngeno now shares the highlights of John Mbadi's first budget at the National Treasury Cabinet Secretary.
On what is typically a day of ceremonial grandeur and patriotic optics, this year's national budget presentation unfolded with unexpected restraint and tight security, marking a notable departure from tradition. Long before the band began its march and the budget briefcase was lifted for the cameras, National Treasury Cabinet Secretary John Mbadi was already in his office at the National Treasury building along Harambee Avenue in the heart of Nairobi, going through the final figures of his first national budget.
Now this is not dummy.
The former minority leader in the National Assembly seemed to have embraced the weight of his new role fully.
It's very interesting. First, it is exciting, I must admit. Well, I don't think I've ever got any much attention as I've gotten this time.
In contrast to past budget days when Kenyans lined the streets outside the National Treasury, waving flags and breaking into patriotic songs at the sight of the Cabinet Secretary raising the briefcase, this year bore no such color of public celebration as security cordons kept citizens far from both the National Treasury and Parliament buildings. When Mbadi finally emerged shortly after 1 p.m., he lifted the iconic budget briefcase as has been the tradition, but instead of cheers and ululations, there was only the clicking of cameras, the silent stare of riot police, and the low thrum of protests echoing from the city blocks nearby. Adding to the departure from norm, Mbadi abandoned the ceremonial Volkswagen Passat, long considered a symbol of modest state power, and instead walked to Parliament led by a marching military band. Above him, a police surveillance helicopter hovered in slow circles. For over 2 hours, Mbadi moved through the speech, touching on tax policy, austerity plans and spending priorities. All this to a poorly attended Parliament. Trevor Ngeno for Prime Edition.
Aloniza kanilea, kanifunza kila jema.
Kinyume na mitazamo potovu, wanawake wengi huchagua kuvaa hijab kwa hiari kama ishara ya uhuru na kiroho na uhuru wa kujieleza. Ni uamuzi wa moyo, si wa shinikizo.
Na Mtume sallallahu alaihi wasallam Pia katika hadithi akatuambia ijtanibu sab'a muhabikat, jiepusheni na mambo 7 zenye kuangamiza watu. Na miongoni mwa hizo mambo 7 akataja Mtume sallallahu alaihi wasallam kuwa ni ashirku billah, ni mtu kumshirikisha Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Hivyo basi njia rahisi ya wewe kujikinga kutokana na shida na dhiki na balaa ni kusoma suratul Falaq, suratul Nas na suratul Ikhlas. Sura hizi zitakukinga wewe mtazamaji wetu kutokana na shida ambazo zitakukumba katika maisha yako.
Pepo ya dunia, pepo ya dunia.
The men and women in boats, they are commanded to defend and protect the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the Republic of Kenya. Their bravery knows no limits.
Make a man go through the wall without breaking the wall.
Laziness, it is not in our vocabulary.
But what are their stories, their tales? Military Tales, every Saturday at 9 p.m. with Ben Troy Njoe.
Welcome back now. I'm going to take you straight to the KBC Garden Studios. I can see Wairimo Njenga is ready to continue with the interview as we analyze the 2025-2026 budget. Wairimo?
Well, thank you, Cynthia. We're still here at KBC Gardens. And as I had earlier on told you, I am with Helen Achieng, who is on my further left, who is a tax manager at EY. And on my immediate left is Robert Minor, member of Public Finance and Tax Committee at ISPEC. Picking up from where we left off, Helen, we were talking about the revenue collection targets. And the National Treasury did indicate today when the CS Mbadi was giving his speech, he said the 2025 budget will be funded by reforms in tax administration. And he did indicate that there has been broadening of the tax base. And if so, I would like to hear from you, Helen. How do we do that without overburdening the already strained taxpayer?
Mm-hmm. Well, very, very interesting question, because Revenue Authority right now is taxed to collect or expected to collect about 2.75 trillion in the upcoming financial year. And just based on historical trends, we've seen them not meeting their targets over and over again. So definitely this is an ambitious plan by government to expect that even in this financial year, we'll be able to collect the targeted revenue. Now, noting that even last year we had a very huge deficit in that regard. So we're still waiting to see what the Revenue Authority would do or the Treasury would do that's new from what they have been doing in the past. But I know the actual plan is to expand the tax base. And if you look at our medium-term strategy, some of the measures that the Treasury sought to undertake to improve our tax base was to now capture the informal sector. You know, they contribute very greatly to our economy currently, but you'll find that a very small portion of Kenyans actually pay tax. So they want to find how they can nap this informal sector or cap them into the tax bracket so that at least we are able to benefit from the revenue from this sector. And we've seen them doing this through the simplified taxation process. We saw turnover tax being introduced, albeit of course the uptake was very low and not as expected. We've seen them trying to simplify the technology for tax compliance for the common wananchi to be able to comply. We've seen them approaching, levying certain taxes on the common basics that they need to do their trading, etc., and also levies, so that at least we expand the number of people who are contributing to the tax bracket in Kenya. And I know another method that they have tried to do is, especially in the real estate sector with respect to rental property, they've tried to try and make sure that every landlord is paying their fair share of rent, and they've tried to also simplify the taxation regime for residential units in Kenya through into the monthly rental income, and they've introduced a lot of technology in that regard just to encourage people to do that. And another focus is on high net worth individuals, where now we see very controversial proposals in the bill to try and curb the high net worth individuals. So trying to expand the number of people who are paying tax, and also again facilitating compliance. A lot of people are currently not or hiding taxes, so revenue authority is tasked to ensure that they make sure, and we see this in assessment, that everyone pays their fair share of tax, and where you have not complied, then the law comes in to make sure that you comply, just to expand. So these are not new things. We've already seen them in the current financial year. We've seen them implemented also in 2023-2024 financial year. So just waiting to see in this current financial year what they would do differently. And ideally what I would propose is stakeholder engagement, civic education, make people want to pay tax, understand where their taxes are being used, so that we all now participate voluntarily in contributing to this tax revenue. But as it stands currently, if the trend continues, I'm not seeing us meeting that target, but we remain hopeful as taxpayers and citizens of Kenya.
Okay.
Yeah.
Robert, earlier on you mentioned that about 22 million have been captured as taxpayers. But then again, there's a huge difference between the taxpayer and the taxpayer who is actually paying this tax. So then how again do we ensure that everyone is paying tax collectively?
Okay, thank you very much. So yes, we are talking of 22 million Kenyans, meaning those are adults in that sense, because for you to register, those are adults. So those are people who are potential candidates to register and account for taxes in Kenya. And I've also heard the Kenya Revenue Authority give statistics that just about 5 million Kenya shillings actively pay tax. We have over 10 million who are registered. They have a PIN number. But how many are actually making remittances, either through, PAYE, if they are employed, or through their businesses? The number is very low. Now, and the question then that one would ask, why is this the case? And I think there's one aspect that is, one, we have a very huge informal sector in Kenya. Now, the informal sector, there's no clear system such as the one in the formal sector, where if you are employed, your employer is responsible for deducting your taxes. In the informal sector, it is largely to do with voluntary compliance, meaning someone will have to come forward, declare their income, deduct their expenses, and pay the balance, based on the tax rate that is applicable. So that it seems like people are still not at a point where they appreciate the role of taxes in Kenya, either because they do not feel the government is doing enough. And the public perception out here is that, to a large extent, when you go to the informal sectors, is that the government is doing nothing. So the messaging by the government has to be clear that, yes, the government may not be doing everything, but they need to demonstrate with actions a few things that they are doing, and they can say, we are not able to do 100%, yes, but we've actually managed to do X, Y, Z. So getting to win the trust and the people from the informal sector to contribute to the kitty is a key one. And just to add on whether KRA is doing enough, I think they are doing quite a bit. From the past 10 years, KRA may not be meeting their target. They've not been meeting, most of the time they don't meet their targets. But what we see is that there's a growth in the annual collections. When probably 2002 or 3, we were collecting less than a trillion. Now we are, 2.2 trillion Kenya shillings. So there's a growth in the tax collections. The issue is we are not getting as much as the government would want. But it is also good to remember that you don't collect taxes from a vacuum. You're collecting from an economy. So if the economy that you're collecting taxes from is not performing very well, definitely you will struggle to collect the taxes. We have over 500 billion of pending bills. Now, these are contractors. These are people who supply to the government and other agencies. They've not been paid. Can you go and demand that tax from, KRA can actually go and demand tax from that person, but can they actually afford to pay? They've not been paid. So there's a ripple effect when one part of the economy is not performing. that affects tax collections. But I think from a revenue authority perspective, they are trying and they are doing quite a bit based on the interactions we have with them. But they are, when the economy is not doing very well, they are also affected by that. Yeah.
Now, Helen, still on the expanding the tax base, we have seen proposals in the Finance Bill 2025 where there is enhancement of e-teams so that they can bring in the informal sector into the tax bracket. We have seen blockchain-based monitoring of the real estate sector and monthly rental income program, taxation of the digital transactions, strengthening of iWhistle platform to report tax malpractices. Are these areas enough to ensure that the informal sector is paying taxes as well?
Well, in my opinion, there is only so much that you can do to increase revenue collection in a country. And one of the most proposed measures is to enhance technology or simplify technology with an aim of ensuring that people are able to pay tax at a more convenient, in a more convenient way. And introduction of e-teams has actually really helped because now Revenue Authority has visibility of the transactions that are happening between businesses and individuals alike. And on the side of the taxpayer, they've made it very easy for them to be able to generate those invoices from the electronic tax invoice management system. And we've seen things like the simplified e-teams method. We've seen things like enhancing iTax capabilities to improve the MRI collection, etc. So one of the ways to actually make tax payments very convenient is improving technology. And right now we're just waiting to see the fruits of that technology, how it will impact our revenue collection going forward. And you know, this issue of e-teams was introduced first in the VAT Act, where registered taxpayers were supposed to issue valid tax invoices, but then now it was expanded now to capture all businesses. So provided you're making a purchase or a sale, you need to have a valid invoice in that regard, which will be transmitted through the system. So Revenue Authority will be able to see what are your incomes based on the invoices that you're issuing and what are your expenses. And therefore, we expect that, of course, taxpayers will be now able to declare the actual income and expenses from a reporting perspective. And also we've seen things like on the monthly rental income collection, we've seen them increasing the number of agents for collecting rental income, you know. So all these concerted efforts are targeted towards raising revenue. And we've seen, like Robert, I like what Robert has said, that there is growth in as much as we are not meeting our targets. So probably someone might call them ambitious, but they are increasing the level of compliance. And actually, currently 2024, as at 30th June, when people file the returns, we'll be able to see the fruits of now the e-teams that we introduced from 1st January 2025. Yeah.
Robert, the government has scaled down its revenue target by 91% through the finance bill, opting not to introduce new taxes, but aiming instead to collect just 30 billion shillings. Maybe you can share with us what strategy is at play here?
So one aspect that I think the government is dealing with is we are coming from a year when we had a lot of issues in Kenya. Last year, the protests that took place last year. So caution was obviously at the forefront where the thinking was, big and about the bill, because there was no way the government was going to introduce as many taxes as they had proposed last year. So caution is number one. The other thing that I would say is that, and I've also heard the CS say that he does appreciate, for employees, we are the topmost level, meaning you cannot tax employees anymore. Because you have the taxes have gone up, you've introduced levies, the affordable housing levy, shift, the percentage is higher. So we are at that point where you cannot get more, otherwise you then risk losing the motivation from these people. Now, with that appreciation in mind, that's why the government is talking of now trying to look at the loopholes that are there and then encouraging those who are actually not paying anything to come into the tax net. Obviously, the issue of the tax expenditure is the key issue in this bill. There's a lot of repeal of incentives and moving of items from zero rating to exempt or completely making them subject to VAT. And when I was starting my career almost about a decade ago, in 2013, they introduced the VAT Act 2013. That act was very neat, meaning we had very few items that were being given either exemptions or zero rating. Come now today, more than 10 years later, they have increased the number of items that are either being given exemptions or zero rating. And why is this the case? In some cases, it's pure political expediency. So a politician is looking to please someone, or they're trying to get something in and they have to, then those goods are added there, or services. Now removing those goods from there, now that again creates another friction, because everyone is saying, you give us this incentive, we are doing away with it. But there are certain things that are probably given because at that point in time, that was the priority. But 5 years down the line, the priority might be different. So ensuring that these tax changes that are happening every year are not happening, tax consistency and ensuring that we have stability of the tax measures is important, and that is the only way that the government is going probably to ensure that the tax revenue grows. Yeah.
Okay. Helen, sticking with the finance bill as we come to a close, my director is telling me to wrap up, but there's one proposal to limit carry forward a period of tax losses to 5 years. I would like to hear from you how this might affect investors and startups, and also the proposal to repeal investment deductions, including those in special economic zones.
Wow. Well, that 5-year carry forward definitely was met with a lot of resistance, and I know the CS and the Honorable Kuria can attest to that, because you see, the reason why we carry forward losses is because you've started a business, right? And probably your business is capital intensive, and therefore you have some capital investment or allowances that you're supposed to claim. And these are huge amounts of money. So if you're told that you're only carrying forward the losses for a period of 5 years, remember, for startups, the period it takes for them to change or to shift to profitability can extend beyond the 5 years, So now telling them that every loss that you incur, you can only carry forward for a period of 5 years will definitely hinder growth of businesses in Kenya and disincentivize taxpayers in Kenya. And again, it also impacts in our foreign investments, because imagine I'm somewhere sitting in a different country, I want to invest in Kenya, so I've done all my budgets, my proposals and everything, and then suddenly the law is shifting. I want to invest in a capital intensive unit. So you see, at the end of the day, it's not helping businesses. You should be able to pay tax only when you make a profit, and that's actually one of the strategic pillars of the Income Tax Act. You're only paying tax when you make a gain or a profit. On this issue of the investments, definitely it will affect, because removing that accelerated investment allowances, and maybe just to clarify, it's not that they will not be allowed to claim investment allowances. It's just that they will claim it over a longer period of time, as opposed to currently when they're allowed to claim all of it in the first year of use, 100%. So obviously, again, these are huge investments, because it's over 200 million investments that are given that incentive. So definitely it will affect the thought process of investors, because the law keeps changing, and ideally it's not good for our economy in terms of investments.
As we wrap up,
each
of you, final remarks. 1 minute, 1 minute.
Thank you. So mine is, it's a good start. I mean, I think the current CS is more aligned and attuned with the reality on the ground. He has also opened up the National Treasury more, to the general public. So our hope is, the measures that they have proposed, and particularly the ones that are affecting the common humanity, actually implemented to get the real benefit. Thank you.
Thank you. Helen?
Yeah. So for me, my closing remarks would be, as a country, I think we are on the right track, because awareness is the first step to now turning the ship around. And so, and I know the government's heart is in the right place with all the reforms that are coming in and are being promised. So as a taxpayer, as a tax practitioner, and also as a citizen of Kenya, we can can only support the government towards achieving the fiscal optimization that the government requires. And also we just hope that as time goes by, especially now from this financial year going into the next, we'll be seeing very significant changes with respect to expenditure and revenue collection at the same time. So for me, I want expenditure to go down and also tax to also go down, and also the debt burden to also go down. So we can only support government at this point.
Thank you, Helen.
Yeah.
Helen is the tax manager at EY, Helena Chieng, and Robert Miner, member of Public Finance and Tax Committee at ISPAC, helping us to break down the 2025-2026 budget. And as they have rightly put it, the budget did reaffirm government's commitment to key policies and strategies as outlined in the bottom-up economic transformation agenda, with a focus of driving sustainable economic growth. We put a cap on this tonight's interview. I take you back to studio with Cynthia Nyamai. My name is Weri Mujenga. Have a good night.
Ilikuwa na mchanga kwa changa wa mtoto wa mazoea yuenda zake na wewe pia unaweza changa kitu kidogo hivi. Siku na mtoto unaitwa Jagwa, nikikuchezea utakimbia. Ushaona huo? Unausha mguu mmoja tu. Anakwenda kusomea udaktari wa macho. Andika ngapi? 200. Swa daktari. Hichi kitabu sio ndio kimepotea? Hichi cha mazoea. Hichi kitabu alionipa ni mazoea. Mtoto mazoea anakwenda ngambo lini? Wiki ijayo. Hichi kitabu tangu cha mwaka jana hichi. Polisi bwana. Polisi. Sasa kama ni polisi mimi si eti basi.
Today we'll be talking about overcoming temptation, living in a world of sin. There are many challenges, temptations that come our way.
God anakupenda tu venye uko. Just the way you are. So you don't need to do anything for God to love you more, and you don't need to do anything less for God to love you less.
If you are in Christ, you can be in the world, but whatever is in the world will not get into you.
This Father's Day, tell us why your dad is your hero. Is it his strength, his kindness, or his bad dad jokes? Post a 1-minute video sharing what makes your dad unforgettable, and you could win a one-night staycation at one of these hotels: the Fairview Hotel Nairobi, the Best Western Hotel Upper Hill, or the Holiday Inn Nairobi. Simply tag your 1-minute clip at Y254 on X, Facebook, and Instagram for your chance to win. Choose one of these hotels to also tag in your post, and you could spoil your dad for a night at Holiday Inn Nairobi, at Fairview Hotel Nairobi, and at Best Western Upper Hill. Don't forget to use the hashtag MyKBCDad. Let's celebrate our heroes in style.
Welcome back. Now, Uganda, Rwanda and Tanzania joined Kenya in unveiling their 2025-2026 budget, focusing on driving investments and rationalizing public expenditure. In Kampala, Finance Minister Mataya Kasaija announced a 2.5 trillion Kenya shillings budget, while Mwigulu Cheba of Tanzania read a 2.85 trillion Kenyan shillings budget aimed at deepening investments in infrastructure and agriculture. Alan Oko looks at the Tanzanian, Rwanda and Uganda's budget speeches.
Tanzania, Rwanda and Uganda, who are all members of the East African Community, joined Kenya Thursday afternoon to present their budget estimates for the 2025-2026 fiscal year. Other EAC member countries like Burundi, South Sudan, Democratic Republic of Congo and the latest entrant, Somalia, did not read their budget statements on June 12th due to overlapping fiscal year end dates, security and political reasons. In Uganda, Finance Minister Katia Kasaija announced a 2.5 trillion Kenya shillings budget, which is 7.2 billion Kenya shillings more from the earlier projection, underscoring a significant fiscal expansion aimed at propelling the nation's growth. Out of this year's budget, 982.8 billion Kenya shillings has been earmarked to service Uganda's debt, with 360.72 billion Kenya shillings being set aside for domestic refinancing, while 1.1 trillion Kenya shillings will go towards capital development. In Tanzania, Finance Minister Mwigulu Nchemba unveiled a 2.84 trillion Kenya shillings budget, which is a 13.4% increase from the 2024-2025 estimates. The Finance Minister has said the government will spend about 970.81 billion Kenya shillings for the recurrent expenditure and 37.89 billion shillings for development expenditure, especially for the revamp of existing stadia and building of new ones in preparations for AFCON 2027. Rwanda's Finance Minister Yusuf Morangwa outlined an expenditure plan of 635 billion Kenya shillings for the 2025-2026 financial year. Under the plan, Kigali expects to spend an additional 108.9 billion shillings, which is a 21% increase compared to the 526.4 billion shillings for the current financial year. Key priority areas include the construction of a new airport in Busegera, as well as agriculture, education, healthcare, housing, and improving electricity connectivity. The Rwandan government expects to collect 372.1 billion shillings in domestic revenues, accounting for 58% of the budget.
Even as 8 member states from the East African community begin to consolidate their budgets, citizens from this particular region hope that the budget estimates are allocated into issues like trade and movement of goods and services. Alan Aoko, Prime Edition.
As Kenya prepares to co-host the 2024 African Nations Championship CHAN and the 2027 Africa Cup of Nations, the sector has been allocated 16.69 billion in the budget proposal presented to the National Assembly by the Treasury Cabinet Secretary John Mbadi. The proposals include provisions for talent development, governance, and the fight against doping.
After a delayed allocation of funds in the 2024-2025 financial year to the Anti-Doping Agency of Kenya, ADAC, almost put the country at the risk of being placed under greater scrutiny by World Athletics, this year's budget proposal seeks to reverse this by making an allocation of 241 million shillings to the body. This allocation will assist ADAC meet the testing requirements for athletes ahead of the World Athletics Championships slated for September in Tokyo, Japan. Speaking at the National Assembly when presenting the budget proposals, Treasury Cabinet Secretary John Mbadi allocated a total of 16.69 billion shillings to the sports sector.
This proposed allocation includes 13.5 billion for the Sports, Arts and Social Development Fund, 2.3 billion to establish an automation and digitization system for the sports registrar, 241 million for the Anti-Doping Agency of Kenya to make Kenya remain competitive in the athletics and other sports, 402 million for Sports Kenya, 245 million for the Kenya Academy of Sports.
Besides the budgetary proposals, the government, through the Finance Bill of 2025, proposes to allow deduction of expenditure incurred in the construction of a public sports facility in such year of income from the 1st of July 2025. The proposal is intended to incentivize taxpayers to contribute to the development of public sports facilities by allowing a tax deduction for related expenditure, which would support the country's vision to be a preferred destination for premium sports events, though no definition of a public sports facility is given. On the downside, the Finance Bill of 2025 proposes to delete the current provision allowing deduction of expenditure incurred by a person sponsoring sports with the prior approval of the Cabinet Secretary responsible for sports. If enacted, the proposal will have a negative impact in nurturing sports and talent, especially on betting firms that have been at the forefront of sports sponsorship. For Prime Edition, I am Daniel Wahome.
Now, the Independent Policing Oversight Authority Chair Isaac Hassan now says they will summon the Deputy Inspector General of Police Eliud Lagat after completing the record statements of all those officers believed to have valuable information on the death of social media influencer Albert Ojwang. Appearing before the National Assembly Administration and Internal Security Committee, Isaac says that circumstances surrounding the death of Albert Ojwang proved to be a poor attempt of a cover-up by police officers at Central Police Station.
The Inspector General of Police, Douglas Kanja, and DCI boss, Amin Mohammed, were before the National Assembly Administration and Internal Security Committee explaining the circumstances that led to the death of Ojwang at the Central Police Station.
The reason why the people of Kenya should believe that what we are telling this committee is believable.
Because it was very incredulous, unbelievable. It was a very poor attempt at cover-up to say that someone has died by repeatedly hitting himself against the wall.
It is during this session that IPOA revealed that the Deputy Inspector General of Police, Eliud Lagat, will be summoned after it completes recording statements of all those officers believed to be behind the death of the social media influencer, Albert Ojwang.
Some may become, some actually suspects, prime suspects. I don't know.
While we are on investigations, have they seen it fit or appropriate to also get a statement from the complainant of this whole case, the DIG?
Yes, we were going to summon him, but our team, our technical team, the investigators.
And it is on that basis, I believe, if the DIG is going to be mentioned, then definitely we will read the statements, and I believe it's on that basis that now he can be able to step aside to allow for that completion of that investigation.
IPOA Chair Isaac Hassan further told the committee that their intent to cover up Ojwang's murder was evident after officers tampered with the CCTV footage at the Central Police Station.
That the CCTV was manipulated or interfered with on the material day.
Yes.
To cover up.
It was true.
It's just a straightforward response.
I agree.
Yes.
I want to confirm it was actually somebody called somebody to come and actually do he was asked whether he could delete a particular section. He said he can't, he has to delete all of it, and he did that.
IPOA boss further says that Ojwang lost his life at the Central Police cell owing to the blood that covered the floors and the wall of his cell.
It's a scene that has stayed in my mind. It's a very bad scene that I saw. So there are also two civilians who are involved in a different way that we need to also investigate.
This as the DCI boss, Amin Mohammed, claims that the Central Police Station OCS Talam was the one who gave the false information that Albert banged his head while in custody.
Banging his head on the wall came from Central Police Station, and he's the officer commanding Central Police Station. Why would an officer coin such a narrative? That's why I said, whatever utterances the OCS Talam is making, we should treat them with a pinch of salt.
Why is it that this OCS prepares and dispatches such an information? What was his interest?
IPOA has also recommended the prosecution of officers who attempted to cover up the incident and did not cooperate with their investigations. IPOA Chair Isaac Hassan has confirmed that the police officers who are linked to the death of Albert Ojwang are set to be brought before the courts in the coming days. Abdiaziz Hashim from Parliament Buildings, Prime Edition.
Well, news just coming in is that Police Constable James Mukwana of Central Police Station in Nairobi has been arrested in connection with the brutal murder of 31-year-old teacher Albert Ojwang. And according to a police report seen by KBC, Constable Mukwana was apprehended by police from the Internal Affairs Unit at the National Police Service and the Independent Policing Oversight Oversight Authority. Mukwana is set to be charged with murder and is being detained at the Capitol Hill Police Station. We will be following up that story for you. Now, protesters took to the streets of Nairobi Thursday to demand justice for the death of blogger Albert Ojwang. The irate protesters engaged police in running battles, particularly along City Hall, Harambee Avenue and Haile Selassie. The heavy contingent of police deployed to maintain peace and order thwarted efforts by the protesters to access the Central Police Station and Parliament buildings.
These were the scenes Thursday afternoon in Nairobi Central Business District. Running battles between protesters and the anti-riot police characterized the day. Protesters came in large numbers to express their disappointment and frustration to the authorities for what they term as failure to crack a whip on those allegedly involved in killing of a blogger Albert Ojwang.
Justice for Albert! Justice for Albert!
City Hall, Harambee Avenue and Haile Selassie were a no-go zone as police lobbed tear gas canister to the adamant and furious protesters. The protesters turned their wrath to property as several cars burned down to ashes around Aga Khan Walk. Efforts by the demonstrator to access Nairobi Central Police Station as well as Parliament were thwarted by the heavy security personnel deployed in the areas. The protesters are demanding for resignation of the Deputy IG Eliud Lagat to allow for proper and transparent investigation of the slain blogger Albert Ojwang.
President William Ruto has called on Commonwealth nations to forge stronger alliances and adapt a united stance against terrorism, money laundering and human trafficking. It is against this backdrop that President warned that the scale and sophistication of transitional organized crime is escalating globally, stressing that no single country can confront the threats in isolation. President Ruto was speaking during the official closing of the 23rd Commonwealth Heads of Prosecuting Agencies Conference in Mombasa County.
While addressing heads of prosecution agencies from 19 Commonwealth nations who had converged at a Mombasa hotel, President Ruto emphasized the need for vigilance and deeper cooperation to identify, investigate, and prosecute the individuals and networks behind these crimes.
No single agency or country can confront these complex crimes in isolation. Through the exchange of knowledge and best practice, we are better able to understand the legal nuances across jurisdictions and craft innovative approaches for effective investigations and prosecutions.
The president called for robust partnerships, integrated international responses, and enhanced prosecutorial collaboration.
Mutual legal assistance and extradition remain vital pillars of this effort. They provide formal pathways for cross-border information sharing. Joint investigations allow for real-time collaboration and pooled expertise, enabling us to dismantle criminal networks more effectively.
He reiterated the need for the nations to harmonize their legal frameworks and build a global front against transnational organized crimes and asset tracing in a bid to deny criminals proceeds of their illegal activities.
Equally important is the vigorous pursuit of asset tracing, confiscation, and forfeiture. Denying criminal enterprises the proceeds of their illicit activities is key to undermining their operations. I challenge the heads of prosecution agencies here to give priority to this particular endeavor. On our part, Kenya is committed to enhancing the resources and capacity of the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions to lead these efforts both regionally and internationally.
Through the government's support, the president noted that Kenya has made significant progress in bringing perpetrators to justice. Director of Public Prosecutions Renson Ingonga emphasized the need to use technology in the fight against organized crime.
The fight against money laundering, terrorism financing, and transorganized crimes is a marathon, not a sprint. It demands sustained effort, unwavering resolve, and above all, a united front. I'm confident that the bonds strengthened and the strategies refined at this conference will significantly bolster our collective ability to dismantle these criminal enterprises and safeguard our societies.
For Prime Edition from Mombasa County, I am Anboru.
Wiki hii kwenye Mkulima
tunajifunza namna ya kumfuga ng'ombe wa maziwa
na kisha jinsi ya kutumia teknolojia shambani.
Watoto wetu wamemaliza shule, wengine wamemaliza college, na ni hapa tu ukulima.
Ungana nasi siku ya Jumamosi saa 10:30 kwa mseto kamili wa kilimo
hapa KBC Channel 1.
19 nations will compete in the Total Energies CAF African Nations Championship, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania 2024, which will be staged from 2nd to 30th August 2025. Amongst the 4 groups in the tournament A to D, Kenya is pooled in Group A, together with Morocco, Angola, DR Congo, and Zambia.
Algeria from the set piece, the header is on target, but it's...
This unique competition featuring the best locally based players from across the continent definitely has something for everyone. Just bring your A game as you let it flow live and exclusive on KBC Channel 1, your true sports partner.
And away from matters fiscal shape of the country and budget proposals to sports now, where Moi Air Base Celestine Biwott emerged the winner of the 3,000-meter steeplechase race during the ongoing Kenya Defence Forces Athletics Championship at Ulinzi Sports Complex here in Nairobi. The 21-year-old Celestine Biwott clocked 9 minutes 51.18 seconds ahead of Dorothy Chemtai, who finished second in 10 minutes 15.60 seconds, while Sheila Cherotich finished third after posting 10 minutes 22.10 seconds.
Like nilikuwa na prepare this one due in the main. Alafu sasa ni prepare to the World Championship.
Laban Kipkorir is through to the finals of the men's 800 meters race after a victorious run in the semi-finals where he clocked a minute 47.47 seconds ahead of Nicholas Kiplagat and Brian Masai, who finished second and third respectively.
Nashukuru Mungu kwa qualify kesho kwa finals. Finals itaamua ni nani atakuwa mshindi. Na pia preparation ya hii mwaka ya 2025 tumeng'ang'ana na tuweke naeka Mungu mbele.
The 2023 Africa Games bronze medalist Vivian Kiprotich was unstoppable in the women's 800-meter semi-final, registering a time of 2 minutes 6.38 seconds ahead of Sheila Chepkosgei and Mercy Kipyego to secure qualification in tomorrow's finals. The 3-day KDF Track and Field Championship is being used to select the team that will represent the forces in the upcoming National Athletics Championship in August. And to football now, where the 2025 CECAFA Senior Women's Championship will kick off Friday with the opening match between defending champions Uganda and Burundi before South Sudan takes on host Tanzania in the second match of the day, feature which will be played at Azam Complex, Chamazi in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. The 2025 CECAFA Senior Women's Championship will kick off Friday with the opening match between defending champions Uganda and Burundi before South Sudan takes on host Tanzania in the second match of day one fixtures, which will be played at Azam Complex in Chamazi, Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. The Kenya women's soccer team Harambee Starlets are already in Tanzania for the championship, where they will start their campaign on Sunday against Burundi at 4 p.m. The CECAFA Championship, which is featuring 5 teams, is being played on a round-robin format. Starlets will face Uganda in their second match on Tuesday next week before they face South Sudan on Thursday. Tanzania, who are the only side that has qualified for this year's Africa Women's Cup of Nations, will use the tourney to get in shape ahead of the continental finals, while Kenya will use the Sekafa matches to prepare for the 2026 Africa Women's Cup of Nations qualifier against Gambia in October. Elsewhere, the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, IBC, has cleared several candidates vying for positions at the forthcoming FC Leopards Football Club elections scheduled 29th of this month. IBC cleared aspirants for the positions of chairperson, secretary general, and treasurer at the Kasarani IBC offices. Secretary General hopeful Isaac Mulindi was cleared to vie in the elections and took the opportunity to promise the club and its supporters of the good days ahead.
I want to be able to come in there and see to it that we have recruitment policies, we have recruitment mandates whereby we know who is doing the recruitment. We know that when that recruitment is done, where is what going where. You know, I mean this with the technical bench, of course, and stuff like that. Also the systems. We have to make sure that when I get there, I want to see to it that we are professional enough, that our ticketing systems are up to date, that they are accountable, and somebody can be able to know what they've paid, what number they are, where they're going, which gate they need to get through. I mean, it's something that other people are doing. And I think as team that started in 1964 at this particular time should have had professionals coming in, human resource experts, lawyers, legal advisors and stuff like that, to make sure that we take back AFC to where it's supposed to be.
And the Kenya Volleyball Federation Kenya Cup quarter-final matches that were originally scheduled from the 20th to 22nd of this month at Kasarani and Nyayo Indoor Arenas have been postponed. Now, the decision was made to pave way for the Rwanda Genocide Memorial Volleyball Tournament and the upcoming Beach Volleyball Championship, which will involve most of the quarter-finalists. The Kenya Cup quarter-finals will now take place on the 5th and 6th of July at the Nyayo Indoor Arena. Newly crowned Kenya Pipeline women's team will be in action together with runners-up DCI, KCB, Kenya Prisons and Kenya Army. The men's quarter-final matches will feature the league champions and powerhouse GSU, KPA, who are runners-up, Equity Bank, APK, Kenya Prisons, Trailblazers and Kapu. Well, and that's it from me. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Bernardo Kumu. Enjoy the rest of your viewing.
Well, from me and the rest of the team, it's been a day well spent with all of you as we analyze the 2025-2026 budget and also took you to the Parliament buildings. And from me and the rest of the team, we do want to wish you a very good night.
Say the art without art would just be, get it? We circumnavigate the globe and traverse the local scene to bring you art and culture at their very best. From fine art, culinary art, performing arts, and even cultural events, you name it, and we have got you covered. My name is Kevin Kasioki, and I will be serving you this and much, much more each and every Friday at 8 p.m. only on KBC Channel 1.
"19 nations will compete in the Total Energies CAF African Nations Championship, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania 2024, which will be staged from 2nd to 30th August 2025. A Amongst the 4 groups in the tournament A to D, Kenya is pooled in Group A, together with Morocco, Angola, DR Congo, and Zambia.
Algeria from the set piece, the header is on target, but it's saved.
This unique competition featuring the best locally based players from across the continent definitely has something for everyone. Just bring your A game as you let it flow live and exclusive on KBC Channel 1, your true sports partner.
Wakati alijifungua mtoto akawa katika hali ya mdomo kuchakaa mzuri,
unaona anapata wakati ananyonya anakuwa na issues, so usaidizi tunaomba mtoto afanye
Save a Life. Nazidi kubadilisha maisha Kenya nzima. My name is Dr. Joseph Moremi. Leo narudisha Njoro, Nakuru County. Remember, tutembea Kenya nzima. Leo narudisha Njoro, Nakuru kutembelea Peter tumetembea naye zaidi ya hospitali 3 na bado tujasaidika. And I keep on saying, for me, I don't give up on someone. I keep on saying, we do our part, tunachia ingine Mungu. I'm still doing my part. Madaktari wanafanya yao, mimi tunachia Mungu. So thank you for being part of this amazing initiative. Watch this as we continue to support Peter.
Nilimzaa tu kama mtoto ule mwingine, kama watoto hawa wengine, lakini kumwangalia niliona Mark hapa. Sasa ile niliona Mark nikaona tu kama vile tu mzazi anaweza kuzaa tu mtoto hivyo. Vile alikuwa naenda akikua nikaanza kuona hii mtoto yangu si kama watoto wale wengine, kwa sababu akianza kwenda, badala vile mtoto anaendaga akianza kuenda na miguu kidogo akiwa na mwaka moja na